Student Page 9, Uncle Milo's Sideshow. Student Page 9, Uncle Milo's Sideshow.
Alrighty, hello everyone, welcome back to Just My Stupid Opinion. I am joined here today with Mythic Arjuna, and we're going to be discussing global terrorism because there was a major terrorism attack that took place in India over the last week. Arjun, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, anytime. No problem. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now, so it's good to have you back on. It's been a little bit. So, what ended up taking place in India over the last week was that there was a terrorist attack that took place in Pulwama, and as it says here, I pulled up an article from Hindustan Times. It says Prime Minister Narendra Modi put Pakistan on notice on Friday to brace for a strong response to the terrorist strike that left at least 40 Central Reserve Police Force troopers dead in Kashmir, an attack that escalated tensions between the two neighbors and united India in grief and anger. On Thursday, a suicide bomber rammed a car laden with explosives into a CRPF truck, part of a convoy of 78 vehicles in the Avantipura area of Pulwama district. Initial reports said 44 men were feared to have been killed. On Thursday, the CRPF confirmed 40 deaths, making it the deadliest attack in Jammu and Kashmir's three-decade-long insurgency. So, that's sort of the overview. Arjun, would you like to go into more details as to what happened?
Yeah, so article covers some of the basic facts. So the basic thing was that there was this 20-year-old guy who had already been radicalized by the time he was in his teens by the Jaish-e-Mohammed, which is a terror group responsible for this attack. So this 20-year-old guy, he somehow gets 300 kilograms.
You still there, Arjun? I think I may have lost you for a second. Arjun, I think I lost you for a minute. So everything seems to be freezing up on my end. I think Arjun's still around, but I can't hear him at the moment. Interesting.
Who sort of he leads this sort of a madrasa, which is headquartered in Pakistan, in Rawalpindi. Yeah.
Arjun, sorry about that, man. I actually froze up for a minute, so I lost you. I couldn't hear you for the last little bit. Do you mind just restarting?
Okay. From where?
Just actually, it was only a few seconds into when you started talking until just now. Do you mind just restating what happened?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the interesting bit is about Pakistan and its complicity in this whole thing. Now, the basic facts about the case are, as you mentioned in your thing, and about 45 CRPF personnel were instantly vaporized because they were carrying nearly 7. So this 120-year-old guy who was carrying 700 pounds, nearly 700 pounds of or 300 kilograms of military grade explosives. Now, where he got the military grade explosives, there can be only one answer to that. That is Pakistan, because no, he cannot get that in India. He cannot get the explosive called RDX. He cannot get that in India from any source because because it is strictly monitored. And yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I was just double checking to be sure, but yeah, you're all good. Please continue.
Okay, so the fact is that now the interesting bit is that this group, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, is led by this guy called Maulana Masood Azhar. He is a former Taliban guy, right? Remember the Afghan Taliban, Pakistan Taliban? He's a former Taliban guy. So when the Afghan, this guy and the Taliban in Pakistan also was not really active. This guy was throughout that period, he was the go-to guy for the Pakistan to contact the Taliban and other terror groups. And throughout, he has remained very close to the Pakistani establishment, where even now that he is given government protection. The moment India announced that there will be a proper response to this terror attack at a time and place of our choosing, the Pakistan government immediately went to the Jaish-e-Mohammed headquarters and and took over the security of that place. The police and the Pakistan army have moved into the Jaish-e-Mohammed headquarters and have completely set up a secure perimeter around it. So he's as establishment as it gets as far as the non-state actors that fold is concerned. Like he is the establishment basically. He is like an extension of the establishment, and that is why it is very important that India gets him now, because India has been trying to get this guy be declared as a terror, as a global terrorist, but China has been intervening because China has interests in Pakistan, and Pakistan has been requesting China to sort of intervene on their behalf at the world stage. But even now, after this attack, I don't think China has too much of a leverage, because everybody has been naming and shaming Pakistan as of now. So moving on from this, now there have been noises from various parts of Pakistan saying, "Oh, this is not us. Give us proof. Show us proof." Now the fact is, the guy who orchestrated this, the Jaish-e-Mohammed guy, Maulana Masood Azhar, who planned this, he has come out and taken responsibility for this attack. He's under Pakistani protection. Now this whole proof thing is a sort of a farce thing going on right now. So now the whole point of today's, like, our conversation today is, like, what is the actual reality of terror, right? Like, what effect does terror have in our life in today's time? And we are using this event that happened, this tragedy that happened in Pulwama, where so many of our reserve forces died. Because see, in the Western world, it is not really a reality as close to home as that, right? The time you have ever had something that close to home is when 9/11 happened. But on, say, for example, on Canadian soil, there haven't been any such terror attacks. Like, at least I'm not aware of it.
Not to that scale. We do have our own, but yeah, you're right.
Pardon me?
I was saying that we haven't had it quite to that scale where we've had some 40 people dead, but we've had our fair share. I mean, we had the Danforth attack that took place a little while ago, less than a year ago, and that killed a fair amount of people. I think it was around 10 people. But yeah, you're right. We haven't had about 40 people dead from a terrorist attack over here in Canada.
Yeah, but in India, the reality is so harsh that there is armed security everywhere. At every public public place, there is armed security, whether it be a stadium, whether it be a mall, whether it be a shopping center, whether it be a marketplace. There is armed security at every entrance and exit. The people for things like going into the movie hall, people are they have those radio bars and they pat you down and they check you. So that reality is there in India. Like, we have been dealing with terror for nearly 50 years now. Pakistan has been using non-state actors to attack India and other parts of the world, not only India. For example, I'll give you an example for Canada and US, right? Canadian and US troops were positioned in Pakistan and were using Pakistan as a launchpad for their war on terror in Afghanistan, right, against the Taliban. Now, Pakistan on one hand was providing a launchpad for the US and Canadian and other coalition partners, military coalition partners, to strike into Afghanistan, to sort of be deployed into Afghanistan from Pakistan. And on the other hand, Pakistan was providing funding, logistics, and protection and intelligence to the Taliban, right? So it was taking money from the West, from Canada, from the US, from all these places, and then giving that money and that intelligence to the Afghan Taliban and telling them where to attack. And so many Canadian and the US and other Western soldiers, like from the UK and all, have lost their lives because of this. And this is primarily because people don't understand in the West, like at least the establishment people in the West don't understand how to deal with Pakistan. Because Pakistan is a kind of person who holds a gun to its head and says, if you don't give me money and if you don't give me what I want, I will shoot myself. It's that kind of person. It's that kind of a country, right? And on the other hand, if you don't give it aid, this whole country will collapse. Because recently there was a news that Pakistan's forex reserves, right, its dollar reserves had gone below $10 billion for the first time in the country's history, which is supposed to be a red line for them, right? And now it has gone down more than $10 billion. Much less than 10 billion. It has gone to around $6 or $7 billion, something like that. So their country doesn't have enough money to buy food for the next 2 months. It is on the verge of collapse. It is only getting by on aid. It gets about $6 billion in aid every year from different sources. Right? Now, this country is funding, and it takes all that aid money and makes tactical nukes, and it puts it into its nuclear program. It puts that money into paying these non-state actors such as Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, Pakistan Taliban, Afghan Taliban, Haqqani Network, you name it, like Al-Qaeda. They were funneling money into Al-Qaeda. They were funneling money into ISIS. These guys, the Pakistani establishment is taking your aid money and giving the money to people who are killing your people. Right? That is one of the major reasons why India refuses to join the military effort in Afghanistan. It has sent no soldiers because of this reason. So Pakistan is the problem in the world, not ISIS, not it wasn't ever Al-Qaeda or Osama bin Laden for that matter. It was Pakistan. Because I'll tell you how crazy Pakistan is. The head of the military nuclear program was this guy called let's call him Mr. Mir. Okay. This guy, he was a loony, right? He at one point of time, he wrote a book in which he detailed like odd calculations, like of the exact temperature of hell and how many angels can stand on a pinhead, like that kind of thing. Like, it was a completely lunatic book. This guy had at one point of time gone to Osama bin Laden and offered him nuclear technology. And after a 20-minute meeting with Osama bin Laden refused that offer. And later it was found out Osama had refused that offer because he was very wary of the fact, because he did not think that chap was dependable or right in the head. So imagine how crazy you have to be for Osama bin Laden to think you're crazy. Right?
That's a pretty good point on that, yeah.
So these guys are nuts. Like, they have, like, the major problem why people don't want to shut off their aid is because Pakistan is a country which will collapse. It will, first of all, the country will collapse and it will break up into different regions, right? All the different provinces will declare their independence. And the second thing is, the nuclear weapons that they have will most likely fall into terrorist hands. That is the reason why their aid is not being stopped from various sources in the world. That is what the world is afraid of, that if Pakistan collapses, who will the nukes go to? And Pakistan is the only country on earth which does not have nukes in a static location. Their nukes are on the move all the time. Their nukes are in trucks and they're moving all around the country all the time. They're not in a static location.
What reason would there be for this? Like, why would they be moving their nukes around rather than keep them in as one location?
Because if they keep it in one location, terrorists will attack those locations and steal the nukes.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going with that.
It is an insane situation. And they are one of the biggest. They themselves are one of the biggest victims of terror. There's something like a crazy number, like 80,000 people have died in their country due to terrorism, which is a crazy number. Like in the last few decades, it is a crazy number. So Pakistan is in a position where it is about to collapse, but people don't want it to collapse. A, because it will become a humanitarian crisis where people will flee from a collapsing country, because that place is a shithole. And secondly, the thing is the nukes might fall into the wrong hands. So it's a double money sort of. It's like a one in each hand kind of thing, right? Where you don't know what is going to happen. So you don't want another Syria, and you don't want another Hiroshima either, because these guys are mad. Like they'll even if they know, like what do you tell a guy? Pakistan is like, it's like that old Russell Peters joke, right? Like the terrorists are like these guys. Like don't worry, I'll come. If you don't shape up, we'll kick your ass. So these guys will say, don't worry, we are kicking our own ass. So they're like that. So like if there is a guy holding a gun to his head, and what are you going to do with that guy? You can't say that if he shoots himself, there is a shitload of things that are going to go wrong. If he doesn't shoot himself, then he's going to use the money he takes from you and funnel that money to people who are trying to kill you. So it's a very bad situation. And the worst of all is that because of Pakistan, soldiers from various countries are dying, like in India, right? Soldiers from various countries which are currently fighting war on terror are dying. Pakistan is directly responsible for that, and there is nothing your establishment can do about it because they don't know how to deal with Pakistan. There was this one guy called Bruce Rydell, who was one of the top guys in the American intelligence community a few years back, right? During Bush and before that also. He gave a talk once about Pakistan, saying he's the guy who decides the policy on Pakistan and that region of the world, the security policy for America. And he said, we don't know what to do with Pakistan. They lie like so convincingly that they're not ashamed. If they get caught, they are not ashamed. They don't worry about the credibility. They're not worried about anything.
Well, I find also
they behave like an addict.
Well, I find one of the problems, too, that we have is that I find that the UN has allowed this to go on because they've empowered these sort of countries inside of whether that's their human rights organizations or in the General Assembly. They've empowered a lot of these countries to be able to speak for themselves and to avoid these sort of sanctions that the UN would normally implement against a country that is this guilty. I mean, we have countries such as Saudi Arabia, and we have Pakistan. I mean, Iran is also, like, these are probably the three countries that are the biggest funding of global terrorism, yet they refuse to do anything about it. And this is because the UN has no teeth, as well as they've been corrupted by a lot of these Islamic organizations who are then using the UN to push for policies and push for what they want in the global region. So it's like the UN is actually just as complicit when it comes to allowing this to happen as Pakistan is or Saudi Arabia. I mean, one thing that I still can't believe was that deal that Trump made with Saudi Arabia, considering the history that America has had with Saudi Arabia. I mean, I believe that there were things that went on behind the scenes when it comes to 9/11, but I do believe that there was the actual attack that was carried out by the Saudis, and I do. But that being said, they then turn around when Trump became president, and they gave him $200 billion in weapons, one of the biggest weapon deals ever made. I mean, hell, even Canada is sending the Saudis friggin' armored vehicles right now, despite all the problems we're having with them. It's just right now the Western nations have been very weak in dealing with these countries.
See, there is okay. As you said, yeah, UN has empowered a lot of people. And if you hear Pakistan's press statements and public statements of late regarding any crisis that is going on in their country, you will see that it is the same old talking points which you hear from the left, right? They'll try to use that old left type talking points. And on the other hand, they are the ones who are at fault, right? For example, there is a humanitarian crisis going on inside Pakistan, which is where they are committing war crimes against the Baloch people. All over the world, if you go to the Pakistan embassies, you will always see a bunch of protesters outside Pakistan embassies across the world, and they'll all be Baloch. Balochis it is estimated that up to anywhere between 50 and 100 Baloch people are being killed every day. There was this video that came out of Pakistan where these two young Baloch boys were picked up, were captured by the army. They took the boys out to the desert, shot them, urinated on the bodies, spit on the bodies, went off. Then they started walking off. Then they turned back, emptied their more onto the bodies, and then went off. The kind of hate that they have towards the Baloch is a crisis, and they're committing war crimes, like worse than what were committed in Serbia and all those places, like those things, much worse than those. But the UN is not really has blinders on regarding that, because it's of course an Islamic country, so Islam is a religion of peace and love. They spread their peace and love with bullets and RDX and suicide bombings. So anyway, so the fact is that, and the Kashmir issue, right? They feel that they have a claim on Kashmir. Kashmir never in its history wanted to join Pakistan, and never in its history did it want to join India. Kashmir wanted to be an independent country. Okay. Now, what happened was, that was agreed to by India. They tried to negotiate with Kashmir, saying that the history of this land is with our country. You join India. You are a landlocked country. You have very few resources. It will serve you very well to join our country. But they refused. Even though the king over there was Hindu at that point of time, they refused. So India said okay. Pakistan, on the face of it, said okay. But immediately after independence was sort of declared, Pakistan sent its army into Kashmir at one point. Like few months after Pakistan and India's independence, Pakistan sent their army into Kashmir. They came as far as the capital of Kashmir, the Srinagar. They were 1 hour outside Srinagar. That was the time when the king of Kashmir, he flew to India and said, please help us with this. The army is coming. We need your help. So that was when the Home Secretary pulled out the accession papers and said, okay, please sign these papers. Because this is a problem. If you want to be an independent country, this is a problem between two independent countries. This is not our problem. But if you want our military assistance, then you have to join our country. And then the story after that goes that the king abused the hell out of that guy, the Home Secretary, and then he signed the accession papers, and that's how legally Jammu and Kashmir joined the country as a part of India. It became the part of Union of India. Now, this is a legal basis for the history of how Kashmir is an integral part of India, which Pakistan till this day denies. So after this happened, Kashmir became part of India, and India sent its army, and India beat back the army. And they came to, India had kept on fighting for 15 more days. They would have pushed Pak completely outside, but our leftist prime minister of that time, Jawaharlal Nehru, in his wisdom or lack of it, he sort of stopped the battle there, and what is known as today as a line of control was formed. Right, the Pakistan occupied Kashmir part. So after that, after India got Kashmir, after the army was beaten back, in 1948, the Pakistan army sent soldiers dressed as civilians and started an armed assault on Kashmir. They try to make it like as if there was a civilian uprising against the Indian government. But it was proven to be that they sent non-state actors, a combination of non-state actors, and this is in 1948. They're sending non-state actors and Pakistani soldiers dressed as civilians in 1948 and started a fight with the Indian army, but which the Indian army won. So that is the first Indo-Pak war in 1948, which today Pakistan, if you go to Pakistan, you will find in no history book and in no mention will you in Pakistan. They have completely removed that from their history. Pakistan, so that is the genesis of the non-state actors and how embedded they are. How embedded they are with the establishment, and that is the basis of the Kashmir conflict, right? Pakistan. So when it was a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, but again Jawaharlal Nehru, in his wisdom or the lack of it, went to the UN, which he had no business of going to, right? He went to the UN and he said, so Pakistan said there should be a referendum in Kashmir on whether they want to stay a part of India or they want to join Pakistan.
Okay.
So in India, so the UN said there are 3 conditions that need to be met, right, for the plebiscite to happen, for the referendum to occur, right? The first condition was demilitarization, that both countries need to demilitarize Kashmir. India agreed on the condition that if Pakistan would do it simultaneously. Pakistan refused to demilitarize. Every time till date they go to the UN, they say there should be a referendum in Kashmir, but the UN says, but then you have to demilitarize Kashmir, and even today they refuse. They say that no, there should be no demilitarization. So that is where the entire thing about referendum in Kashmir and the UN involvement in it ends. So we have a legal basis that Kashmir is a true and legal part of the Union of India, and we have a policy basis that where Pakistan, even on the intervention of UN, has refused to sort of demilitarize that area and has refused to fulfill any conditions that the UN has put for the referendum to go ahead. So any claim from that side that says that Kashmir should be free and independent or Kashmir is an integral part of Pakistan is absolutely bullshit, because I'll give you another example. When the 1962 war with China happened, the Indo-China war happened, China took possession of a certain part of Kashmir called the Aksai Chin. The Aksai Chin area was taken over by the Chinese because it is easier, if the access to that area is easier from the Chinese side. So they were able to take it over. And it's a disputed area. India still says that is our land, which the Chinese are occupying. But the fact is, at that time, that the Pakistani soldiers were occupying that area, right? That was part of the line of control. So when the Chinese took over, the Pakistanis very gladly gave that part to China. China asked for it and they gave it to China. So that bolstered India's claim, saying that if Kashmir is such an integral part of your country, then how come you are giving away such an integral part of your country to China? You can't be that good friends, can you be? Right? It's like saying, oh, this is my house. I love this house. This house is an integral part of my possession, but that room belongs to my neighbor because he asked for it.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly work that way. And I'd like to take the time to welcome Bold Like a Leopard. Bold, how's it going, man?
Hey, glad to be here on a Sunday. Thanks for putting this together, even though it's been kind of removed from the event by over a week now?
Something around there, yeah. So yeah, we were just Arjun was just giving some backstory about the attack that took place in India over the last week, and then just sort of the history that goes that's gone on between the two nations.
Yeah.
But so I think we've covered this topic pretty thoroughly. But it seems like terrorism side of the Middle East itself has always been the bigger problem. We have our problems over here in the West, but it's always been in the Middle East that we've seen the most terrorist attacks that take place. And I mean, it seems pretty obvious to anyone who looks at it that it has to do with with the Islamic ideology that's over there. They just seem to spring out a lot of extremists who are willing to do all sorts of crazy attacks against. I mean, this also happens in areas in Africa as well. But one thing about it, too, is that I found that a lot of these groups are being funded by Western countries. The fact that we look at how this sort of has played out in between Iraq and Syria. I mean, it turns out that some of the forces that were being backed by the U.S. turned into be ISIS. And then even here in Canada, we've seen money that has been sent. I mean, sent by our Pakistani minister has been given to extremist groups that are then turning around and giving that money to these sort of terrorist groups over in the Middle East. And it's just the fact that we're not like
who go and
we can
do Western soldiers.
We can do a lot to prevent this sort of we can do a lot to prevent the funding from going there. But the problem is that when in this day and age, you have to worry about being called racist if you're not going to give money to a specific organization simply because of that reason. I mean, even now, I still see it's like we know that something like CARE, I forget the acronym for CARE right now. But anyway, we have CARE, which has been pretty much linked back to funding different terrorist groups, and still they receive funding. I mean, one thing to me that killed me, it really killed me, was when Canada announced that we were taking in the White Helmets. Because the White Helmets were backing ISIS and al-Nusra in the Middle East. There were plenty of videos showing them working with them. There was images of them celebrating victories next to ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And yet now we're starting to turn around and pretend like they were some sort of humanitarian group there. I mean, the one that really, to me, was the icing on the cake that you could see who these people were, was a documentary that was done by Al Jazeera about the White Helmets. And at one point, they're back at base, and they're just, like, sort of winding down for the day. And then in the background, you literally see the ISIS flag hanging on the wall there. It's like, how much more obvious do you need to be?
So, but Al Jazeera has been known to be a spokesperson of the ISIS. So like the mouthpiece of the ISIS. So, see, one thing I keep hearing about is one thing I keep hearing from everybody online is there is something in the Islamic ideology that breeds terror and fundamentalism. But I never hear anybody say, why is that? Why? What is there in Islam? What are the particular things in Islam that breeds terror? So I got to know a few things about it, and the main thing is they have this idea of Armageddon, right? They call Qayamat, right? Their goal is that when we have taken over the world, when we rule, when we have spread to all parts of the world, this is written in their scripture. When Islam has spread to all parts of the world, there will be one army that will march from Syria into Rome, and there will be one army that will march in from that Persian area into India. Because India and Rome will be the final bastions that will be in their mind was that India and Rome means Christians basically. Christianity and Hinduism will be the last two bastions against which Islam will have to fight a global war. And once the war is fought and these two forces are defeated, like basically Hinduism and Christianity are defeated, when everybody has converted to Islam, we will all ascend to heaven together simultaneously and join God. Basically, it's the death cult version of Islam. right? And this version of Islam is propagated in three strains of Islam, which is Salafis, Wahhabis, and Deobandis. Deobandis are a group of Muslims who came out of the Deoband region in northern India. So these three flavors of Islam, as I like to call them, are the death cult version of Islam. They want to kill everybody and then ascend to heaven together. Everybody gets 72 virgins. Basically, that's their idea. So, which is an insane plan. Let's call a spade, which is an insane plan, and that is the reason why they use terror, why they form these fundamentalist groups. Like, for example, the name Jaish-e-Mohammed, it means the army of Muhammad. Like, these guys think we are doing a religious duty by killing everybody, including ourselves, and ascending to heaven. So, anyway, it's very fair for people to say that this is an insane ideology. That this is possibly even worse than communism, and that's saying something. So but you have to hand it to communism. They killed way more people in the last 100 years. But the fact is that this is the basis from which they work. Now, Pakistan has adopted this as policy. They have adopted this ideology, this version of Islam as their government policy. That's an insane thing to say that a government adopts this policy. Because that country is based on the idea that Muslims deserve a country. The entire is Muslims need a country, so that is Pakistan. Their entire country is based on an acronym. Pak means it's the Arabic word for pure, and Stan is Stan, area. So pure area. Basically, that is the translation of their country's name. So this whole thing, which is emanating out of Pakistan, and Pakistan is the hotbed of world terror right now. Any terror attack happening in any part of the world has some form or some link in some way to Pakistan. Either the recruits went from there, whether it be the attempted bombing of the Jeddah Mosque that was done by a Pakistani national, whether it was that those two Pakistani husband and wife in USA who went out and shot everybody up with automatic
San
weapons.
Bernardino.
San Bernardino, right? These guys are going to different parts of the world, getting indoctrinated or are already indoctrinated and going there and creating havoc. Right? So, the Islam, if anything in Islam is a problem, it is Pakistan. Pakistan has to be dealt with. And you may consider me to be biased, but then I would invite you to check Google and fact check me and say, prove me wrong in anything that I have said. Right? You can say, oh, you've been attacked by Pakistan, that's why you're saying this. But then fact check me and prove me wrong. Right? Just like when I said that apart from the Houthi rebels and the Hezbollah, name one Shia terror group. You can't name. Most terror groups are Sunni. Right? In a similar fashion, Pakistan, and by the way, Pakistan is the country which initially offered and gave nuclear technology to North Korea. When there was a blanket ban on nuclear weapons on North Korea, Pakistan, not China, Pakistan gave them nukes. China took it further, but the first people to give nuclear technology to North Korea was Pakistan. Pakistan was the one to give nuclear technology to Iran. So Pakistan, and as I mentioned before, Pakistan tried to give nuclear technology to Bin Laden, but Bin Laden ran the opposite direction. Because, So, so this whole thing that is going on in Pakistan is that you have to find a way to isolate that country. And that is exactly what is happening now. Like recently, Japan has come out and said with Pakistan. Russia has sort of backed off with their relations with Pakistan at India's behest. The only country that insists on right now supporting Pakistan is China. The Arabs, see, at there is this saying in Hindi, right, which roughly translates to "won't even spit on them." Like they are so beneath. For example, the Arabs won't even spit on the Pakistanis. That's how low they think the Pakistanis are. Means I'm sure any Arab who goes to Pakistan from Saudi Arabia or from any other part of the Arabian world, when they go to Pakistan and go back, they at least have a bath 10 times. But they hate Pakistan so much, but they give money to Pakistan to spread terror. Because Saudi Arabia is the financial center for Wahhabi terror across the world, whether that be Al-Qaeda, whether that be ISIS, whether it be the Chechen rebels during the Chechnya conflict. They were Salafis, funded by all these Middle Eastern countries and Pakistanis. Right? Most of the recruits from Pakistan who went to ISIS, like most of the foot soldiers, like the worst positions the ISIS used to put their people in, the Pakistani recruits would be put in those positions. So even in the Muslim world, Pakistanis are looked down upon. Let's just say that. That is because, but that is for a different ideology. They have got that Arab supremacy thing going on. But they are hated even in the Islamic community. So it is a country that is caught between a rock and a hard place in a way. Now, but it won't give up its links to terror.
Now, there was one thing I wanted to touch on with you guys while we were here talking about terrorism, because one sort of propaganda saying that is constantly pushed is the idea, especially when we're talking about the States and Canada, is that right-wing terrorism is the biggest threat to our societies. This is something that has been said by news media, by left-wing activists, by governments, time and time again. But the thing is the facts don't actually back that up, because you can definitely find some examples of right-wing terrorism. I mean, even just recently, there was something, and maybe Bold knows more about this, is there was something about there was a guy in the military that was just caught trying to commit acts of terrorism, I believe, and I think he was actually going to exclusively focus on the Democrats. Can you just sort of give us some more information on that, Bold, if you know?
Yeah, it was a Coast Guard. His name was Christopher Hassan. I haven't looked too deeply into it, but I believe he was going to try to murder a number of Democratic congressmen. I think Steny Hoyer, who's the second-ranking Democrat in Congress, was on the list, and so was Ocasio-Cortez. So he kind of this roid-raging white supremacist in the Coast Guard. And the thing is that the same story came out during the Jussie Smollett controversy. And because there were so many jokes and memes about Jussie Smollett, I think it got kind of buried because nobody really cares about a failed, terrorist or whatever he is. And I'm not too sure how far he got in his plans, because the fact is that he was stopped prior to actually carrying out any attacks. Whereas a couple years ago, there was the baseball shooting on, I think it was in May, against several GOP members of Congress, including the majority whip, Steve Scalise, if you remember him. He was seriously injured and almost died. And, the media was kind of, for a while they were like, yeah, this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. But so there were a number of people who were like praising the shooting and stuff like that, and there were many people who. Another thing was that the shooter in that case was an out supporter of the Bernie campaign, and he was, explicitly political. So, I think that there are a number of really screwed up people who are, supporting, like the MAGA bomber, for example, was kind of a freak. He was kind of a freak. So he was, if you remember, in November, he was caught mailing all these fake bombs to people at CNN headquarters and stuff like that. But the reality is that you could chalk this just as much up to mental illness as you can to just political ideology. So I think that there are people like that who are right wing, like people who commit these attacks or try to, at least. But there's also left wing people that do that. There was a guy I remember who had this hilariously cringe-worthy video of himself with, he had like a revolver, and he said he's going to go shoot a bunch of Trump supporters in Los Angeles, and he put it out on YouTube, and I think within like 3 days, the cops just showed up and arrested him, and it turned out he was just like some crazy dude. So this type of thing, you have to remember, there's like dumbasses all over the country, and then people want to paint that as the reality across the political spectrum, and it's not an organized effort the same way that Arjun is describing. What's it called? The Lashkar Taiba,
Yeah.
the group. Yeah, those groups have like real developed, chains of association and command. And what they're complaining about here, this Christopher Hassan, sure, he probably could have assassinated one of these people, but he's just one person. And Ocasio-Cortez was complaining the same week about how the New York Post published the building where she lives, which is this luxury high-rise in Washington, D.C., which, I guess she has a point, but she never ever complained about Tucker Carlson's house being surrounded and almost broken into by Antifa people. She never complained about, any of these people. Like Stephen Miller's house was also surrounded by people, and they were trying to basically keep him up at night. He's just an advisor. He doesn't actually have any real, like, he can just send recommendations to Donald Trump. Other than that, he doesn't have necessarily any real power at all. There was a guy who, I believe, after the election, he leaked the addresses of a number of GOP congressmen and senators. So she never objected to any of that. But now, because some roid-raging freak from the Coast Guard wanted to go after some people, well, don't publish that I live in a tower with 2 saunas, one for men and women, and a pool and all of these Peloton systems. Don't publish that. It's going to threaten my safety. Well, maybe you should get a gun.
But that's the kind of...
She lives in D.C., by the way. D.C. has the worst. I think D.C. might have worse gun control laws than Chicago.
Well, that's sort of going on to, you sort of touched on it a little bit when you were talking, is that not all terrorism involves guns and bombs. I mean, Antifa itself has been designated, at least in the States, a domestic terrorist group, and we've seen the sort of actions that they've taken. This includes attacking civilians. We can look at what... It wasn't just Antifa, it was a bunch of different black bloc groups, but what ended up happening in Germany during the G20 summit in Hamburg back in 2017, there was about 6,000 people that took to the streets, committed acts of violence, attacked people, committed a bunch, like millions of dollars worth of damage to public and private property. But then this is a sort of group that gets supported by people like, I think Senator, was it Feinstein ended up supporting them? Or maybe it was, I think Nancy Pelosi has also been on record as supporting them. But then they don't get criticism for this sort of actions that have taken place. And even something like the MAGA bomber is, there was a ex-cop who came out when that was going out. I think he took to Twitter, where he was showing all the problems with these pipe bombs, is that he doesn't even believe these pipe bombs were rigged to blow up. He doesn't even know if they were real, because he was talking about certain things such as there was wiring coming out of both sides of the pipe bomb. He says, well, a real pipe bomb only requires wiring in one. So I find that this tends to get blown out of proportion, but then they like to sort of bring this up and say how right-wing extremism, right-wing terrorism is the biggest threat to the country. And one thing that they reference a lot is someone like the alt-right or the white nationalists. This is a small group in our society. Even in the States, we're talking about a few thousand people at best. Antifa has been done much worse. I don't know if you guys saw that undercover expose that Steven Crowder did when he put not gay Jared.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, they were literally talking about getting weapons, bring your gun, here's a knife, here's an ice pick. If you ever need guns, come to this location. We're trying to get our hands on assault weapons and this sort of thing. And as far as I could tell, these were not legal firearms that they were trying to get their hands on. But this is the sort of thing that goes untalked about. In fact, even in that expose, Crowder spoke about how when he got all this footage, he tried to turn it over to members of the media, and none of them took him up on it. There's very few attacks that can actually be attributed to right-wing extremists. Even back in, I think it's almost a year now, in May, there was about May of 2018, there was a guy that in Toronto, he ended up driving his car down the street and he ended up slamming into a bunch of people. This is sort of when you started to hear the rise of the incels, the involuntary celibates. I don't even think this guy was right-wing, but they were, because of his inability to get laid, they were painting him in this light. So they just take every opportunity to try and paint it as right-wing extremism, even though you can find examples, but it's not even remotely close to the amount that they're trying to like. It's not even remotely close to the real situation.
The other difference is that the right-wing extremists are very poorly organized, and the fact that if you follow any of these right-wing like extremist people like Chris Cantwell and what's that other guy's name, Paul Nehlen, they all seem to turn on each other and call each other a Jew, and you get money, or they call each other FBI informants, which probably some of them are. So it's almost it's so pathetic that people think that this is like a huge deal. Like, somebody who's really going to be committing crimes, I doubt will broadcast them to the degree that somebody like Chris Cantwell does. Now, the other thing I want to mention, like sometimes they'll use examples of right wing, like just white people that perpetrate mass shootings as right wing extremists, like the Las Vegas shooter, but they've never been able to establish the motive for the guy. And the other thing is that they always, like, I think I've heard several times from some politicians that they'll never be able to know the motive behind the Las Vegas shooting, yet at the same time the same politicians are backing the Russia investigation, where the whole thing is about motive, the whole thing is about collusion, which is much, in the case of collusion, you don't have any traces of evidence, you don't even have any real tangible give or take of anything like of substance. You don't have any monies that have been transferred. You don't have any actual information that changed hands between Russia and Roger Stone, or Russia and Paul Manafort only gave some Ukrainians some information about polling. That's about it. But with the Las Vegas shooting, they're awfully silent. They don't want to talk at all about the FBI investigation of it. The FBI won't talk about it, and this is like the Trump administration. So, like, my question would be, like, if the left-wing media wants to dig into something that could be this massive conspiracy by a white supremacist or whatever you want to call it, how come they're not investigating the Las Vegas shooting? Because I don't see any evidence of them doing it. They never talk about it. It's been completely forgotten.
See, that's the thing. There are 2 points to be made here, okay, about right-wing terrorism, right? If anybody remembers the Charlottesville thing, right? There's a big UN cry about that one white supremacist guy. Okay, Bold, you make a good point about their organization. Is that in the Charlottesville thing, there was this one guy who was like saying like screw all like non-white people and all that, whatever. But if you notice, all the reporters who were trying to interview him and like calling him a racist and all, they were outnumbered like by reporters. So if right-wing terror and the KKK, or for that matter, like any white supremacy groups were really that much of a problem, they won't be outnumbered 50-1 by reporters, right? Who are trying to paint him as a white supremacist, which is very different from like in the 20s and 30s when 50,000 KKK members walked down like that road in New York to the Democratic Convention, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So the KKK was a domestic terror group way back. It has that and any other white supremacist group today is of no relevance because they are not organized, they are not funded, they have no recruit. Nobody is like dying to join the white supremacists, right? And how do you define right-wing terror? Because right-wing also includes religious terror, right? So if religious terror is also included, then Islamic terror is absolutely right-wing terror, right? But how come they're such good friends with the right-wing terror groups of all the Islamic countries, right? The left and all the Islamic countries are such good friends. Why? Well, how come? They're the worst perpetrators of human rights violations and terror in the world. If you consider them to be right-wing, then how come you're friends with them?
That is an interesting point, but I don't know. Today it's just smear jobs that they're doing with this. It's an easy way to paint everybody. It's sort of like how they say that anybody that the media disagrees with is far right. I mean, far right these days is traditional conservatism is considered far right to many of the media outlets that's out there, but they're trying to paint them as if there's something more. Recently, actually, this is only within like the last week, maybe less, there was, here in Canada, there was something called the United We Roll. And in that situation, because a lot of people over in Alberta, in the western provinces, they've seen a lot of their jobs lost due to the lack of pipelines and the assault on the oil industry. It was more than that. I mean, there was also immigration was something that was a big part of what they were doing. But they ended up taking hundreds of trucks and they drove it from the western countries and also the western provinces and also the eastern provinces, and they drove into Ottawa and they protested on Parliament Hill. These people were being labeled as white supremacists, far-right extremists. I mean, you saw a bunch of different people over there. There were black people, there were native people, there were Chinese. Like, there was literally the whole sort of elements of the race rainbow, but they were being called white supremacists because just for some odd reason.
Yeah,
and this was coming from mainstream outlets.
Yeah, but that the whole thing of being far right has lost its value because anybody to the right, anybody who is even a millimeter to the right of, say, a person like Mao or Pol Pot is a far right wing for these guys, right? So that entire labeling by that far right wing extremist that has lost its sting. So because these guys consider anybody to the right of Mao and Pol Pot to be far-right extremists. So, and most of these guys, they say that far-right wing is a threat. They're a threat. But they're a threat to who? They're a threat to the left. So the left is sort of, left has created some of the worst terror groups in the world, like in the world history. In India, more people have died from left-wing terror than Islamic terror. Right. The Maoists and the Naxalites of India have killed so many more people than the Islamic people have. Like, see, the Muslim countries, like from which terror emanates, they're okay. They are poor countries. Many of them have illiteracy problems. Like there is a problem of indoctrination at their local mosques and madrasas. Their spiritual and philosophical backing is not so strong. Let's just say that. So they end up going to getting brainwashed by certain mullahs of certain whatever. So that problem they have. But left-wing people are educated people. Most of them have attended school. They're literate. They're educated. They are and most of all, they're committed, right? So, and these guys, these young college students, these guys, they go and join Maoist groups deep in the jungle, and then they carry out armed revolution, what they call armed revolution against the government and the Union of India. So the left wing, if not as much, has more to answer as far as extremism is concerned, because left wing extremism and the left wing ideology has killed more than 400 million people in the last 100 years. So they have to answer for that. And this somebody needs to bring out, but I don't know. It's very difficult to do that till you get the universities out of their control. Because if today you tell an ordinary layman that Hitler was a socialist, he was a left winger, and Mussolini was a Marxist, they will just look at you and think that you are crazy. So, but the fact is that in history, everybody knows that the Nazi Party stood for the Nationalist Socialist Party, the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, and they were formed out of splintering from the German Workers' Party, which was the Communist Party of Germany, right? The German Workers' Party was their Communist Party. Hitler was part of that party, and then he split from them, and he purged the communists, and he formed the Nazi Party. And he is a self-avowed socialist. Goebbels was once known to have said that he was asked that what describes your party, nationalism or socialism? He says always socialism. The heart of the Nazi Party is socialism. All their policies were socialist. All their ideologies they have gotten from socialist thinkers and socialist leaders. They were very much in touch with Stalin, Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini. These guys, they were in touch with each other, right? And these guys are absolutely the poster child of what the left is. And because of the Holocaust, the left decided to instantly dissociate themselves from from Hitler and Mussolini. And now we are fed things like, oh, Hitler was a far right-wing nationalist. Fascism is equivalent to nationalism. No, fascism has come from socialism. Giovanni Gentile and Mussolini wrote that paper together, that manifesto of fascism. And Giovanni Gentile later became Mussolini's education minister. So I don't know, left has got a lot to answer for when it comes to extremism, and it's a bit rich coming that, and this entire narrative of right-wing terror needs to be dealt with now. It needs to be dealt with now. People need to be hitting back at them.
It's just the problem is when they run the educational institutions and when they run the media, they can very easily overlook these sort of things that you're talking about. And again, it's a lot of people, if they don't really pay attention to what's going on, then it's very easy for them to just paint whoever as a far-right extremist. Sort of if we're going back to the example of the United We Rule group that ended up taking place in here not too long ago, is that most people probably only heard about this because of the news, and they weren't looking online about it, even though they had their own Twitter account and were updating everybody about what they were doing, what they were seeing as they were going across. And they were like, one thing the official Twitter account for them was saying is that as they were making their way east, they started to notice just how the economic hardships is hitting all provinces, all little towns, big cities, so that it was all across the nation. But if most people aren't seeing this on Twitter or Facebook, and they're just going to the news and they say, oh, these are far-right extremists, these are white supremacists, then they're just going to buy into it. It's just a lot of people don't want to fact-check the news, even though there's good reasons to do so. Like anybody who fact-checks the news knows how disingenuous they are. And it can be in the biggest ways or the smallest ways. I mean, like, it's even the way that they set up charts and stuff. Like, sometimes, if they're trying to make it look like a chart is going down, then what they'll do is they'll flip the y-axis. So they'll put the 0 at the top and then the highest number at the bottom. So that way it looks like whatever number it is, oh, you know, violence is going down. It's like, well, the 0's at the top and the chart goes on a downward trend. And most people will see that and not really look at the numbers and say, oh, yeah, violence is going down, even though it might be the complete opposite.
See, that's the thing. See, for example, the left knows that white supremacy is not really a threat. So they try to conflate another thing with white supremacy to inflate the numbers, which is white nationalism. Now, white nationalism is not at its core. Japan does ethno-nationalism. There is nothing wrong with ethno-nationalism. Because white supremacy is that white people are better than everybody else and are morally responsible for exercising their responsibility over other races. Which is not the same as white nationalism, which is white people are the majority in this country and we believe in the majority values of this country. White nationalism in itself, as per the definition, is not wrong. But the media is trying to conflate it with white supremacy and make it a bad thing just to inflate the numbers of this threat of right-wing terror. At least that is my understanding of it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're absolutely wrong on that, because this is one thing that that I noticed too. You know, when I first started hearing about the alt-right and white nationalists, I kind of just immediately jumped into the, well, this seems to be white supremacy. When you kind of listen to what they're saying, it's not so much that it's white supremacy, but they're more concerned about things such as like demographics or something like that. They're concerned that they're being demonized. So like it's not so much that I agree with you that it's not so much that they're white supremacists. They're just people who are concerned about the future for white people. And this is actually something you see all the time when it comes to there are black groups that are very similar to this. The only thing is that is seen as progressive, but if it's the other way around, then it's seen as right-wing extremism. I don't know if you disagree, Bold.
I think that it's kind of, you have to just take each case as a separate issue. Now you don't have, like, I think it's like difficult to compare every right-wing movement from country to country. You know, in Hungary, for example, people make a lot of hay over what's going on with Viktor Orban, but I don't really see Viktor Orban and his party, you know, the Fidesz party, actually trying to invade any country or cause any sort of world war, or, you know, kill all the gypsies or something. It's like, you know, unfortunately, you have to accept that some countries just have leaders that, you know, may cause friction with other countries. So, you know, what was really like a big deal for me was watching the Brexit movement unfold over 10 years. I was following it way before Brexit actually happened, and they were trying to characterize, you know, anybody who wanted to leave the European Union as a white supremacist or something. But in reality, for a long time, being a member of the EU simply meant that your country would accept more European immigrants, and for the British, some British actually would rather that more immigrants be accepted from the British Empire or the Commonwealth, you know, meaning countries like Nigeria, India, the West Indies. So it doesn't really compute in my mind when you see that people are just painting all of the right-wing movements in the same category. The same thing could be said, you know, some people say that all of the left-wingers are globalists. but in certain cases they kind of break with it. For example, in Britain, the far left is actually very anti-European Union. You know, regardless of what you think about their other policies, they're certainly not globalist. So people just want to be able to fit convenient labels on every group that they disagree with, and nowhere is it more evident than with establishment liberals.
And Bold, I'm sure you'll agree with me that if the global left could, they would declare Israel to be a right-wing terror organization.
Well, they do. they do. I mean, the only thing that, like with the Israeli government, they're actually, in my mind, they should embrace more of these governments that are explicitly right-wing, as opposed to. I mean, to some extent, I see now that they're supporting some of these centrist politicians in Europe, and I don't see the point, because in about 2 years, a lot of these people are going to be completely out of a job. In France, for example, they're still trying to deal with Macron because like the Yellow Vest movement does have like this fact anti-Jewish, and they do go and vandalize and destroy Jewish property and stuff. But the answer to that is not partnering with Macron, who's just nobody actually supports Macron. So you're actually going to be causing more anti-Jewish hatred by even associating with them. So the main, like, the advice I'd give to people there is to leave France. I mean, why do you want to live there anyway? I mean, they don't use most of their consonants. They don't use deodorant, and they seem to constantly, you know, they win the World Cup with a team that's virtually all people from outside of France. So what's the point?
That made me giggle. But yeah, you're right. You're right. Did our host just exit the show?
Yeah, I think he had to go get some water or something.
But
yeah, I think you know, I don't know when you guys went, because I joined late, but this thing with the Pulwama terror attack, it's just ignored, just like most of the violence that happens in Asia. Nobody here actually covers.
No, but it has gotten some world attention. Like 57 countries have come out and denounced it, including USA and Canada. Trudeau has come out and denounced terror. Like Saudi Arabia stood with Mohammed bin Salman came to India the other day, like day before yesterday.
Yeah, but
he came to India.
I'm talking about like media response to it. Like nobody. I don't even think we even heard anything about it here in the U.S. at all.
See, okay, you might hate me and you might think I'm biased, but if you see Indian media, right, there are like something like 400 news channels in India. Okay, English, Hindi, name a language, this there. And the kind of news reporting and the robustness that I see in Indian news channels, the kind of dynamic and like news which is important, which is connected news, which is with the people, news that is actually reporting important things, right? I don't see that in US news. US news is very, very curated, very. It's like a reality show more than a news show. It's like they have there is very little connection as far as reporting is concerned. There is almost a disconnect from the grassroots. Like, what is the pulse of the country? What do people actually feel? What is important news? What is not important news? Like, there is no, and it's not only in US media, it is there in a lot of Western media. British media is like, absolutely, I mean, there is no head or tail. You can't make a difference. You can't make out the difference between Channel 4 and BBC. You can't make out any difference.
That's the whole problem right now. That's why they're trying to kill independent creators, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's even just websites of people that publish, because they, like, even Mika Brzezinski blurted it out one day that it's our job to tell people what to think on MSNBC. And,
Yeah, I
and
remember
then
that one.
and then there was just this weekend, Bill Maher, who is technically not news, but who's, his whole program is just political commentary and whatever. So he actually blurted it. He said, as part of his monologue was, we have Wolfgang Puck and you have Chef Boyardee talking to the red state voters, and it's just they're elitists. They don't have any.
The
Yeah,
condescension.
like they'll make fun of NASCAR. They'll make fun of people who wear denim shorts or something. That I don't know if it's the same thing up in Canada. I'd assume that people make fun of people from the prairie states over there too, or from and they have that show Trailer Park Boys, which I guess is an appeal to those people. But people actually do in the U.S.
Yeah, everybody who doesn't think like them is a redneck.
Well, yeah, I remember there was the show 30 Rock when it was on with Alec Baldwin and Tina Fey.
Yeah.
And they went and they actually parodied Alec Baldwin went out to the country with in order to see what like rednecks like as entertainment, and they were basically parodying like rednecks tastes and stuff. And the thing is that for a long time maybe it was a good idea, but because the entertainment landscape has diversified, so they're all feeding from a more and more dwindling trough. So like there's a well-documented quote from Johnny Carson, who was the late night host for over 30 years until I think 1991. He was on NBC, and he said that it was something about how he doesn't do his show for Republicans or Democrats because he wants both of them to watch. So nowadays we have Trevor Noah, we have Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, we have James Corden. Who else? There's Samantha Bee. There's all these shows. What's the other guy? Oliver.
Seth Meyers.
John Oliver.
Oh, John Oliver.
Seth Meyers. Yeah, Seth Meyers. That's Seth Meyers. Yeah, so Seth Meyers and Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon are classical late night shows, but they're all fighting for the same time slot, and most people don't even tune in at the time anymore. That they'll watch stuff streaming, or they'll go to they'll download they'll go and watch it on demand or something. So the advertisers aren't really making that much money from a live audience anyway. So their numbers are way down. I think altogether they don't even make up like a quarter of the audience that Carson made, and there were less people in the U.S. at the time. So there, the actual value of these shows is like so low compared to what it used to be, that they're kind of just strangling their own market. Because if one of them were to decide, well, I'm just going to do entertainment, I think that they would probably benefit from it, because there's plenty of people who would be willing to tune in at least a little.
See, one thing is that like a lot of these late night talk show guys and Saturday Night Live for that matter, there is very little difference from the talking points that these guys use in their monologues and whatever throughout the show and the news channels. And that is probably because many of these talk shows are on channels owned by companies which own both the news channels and the channels which the talk shows are on, right? So like these talk show guys have essentially become an extension of the media sort of establishment, and they repeat those same talking points that like these guys use. I don't know. That's my impression of it. I'm just a guy outside the country though.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah,
they just seem.
Photo.
They just all these talk shows, they talk about the exact same thing. They don't challenge each other's points. All they do is just it's It's like they almost have the same writers that are just putting out the same crap every single episode for each other. And I mean, one thing for me too was just there's no they're not being critical at all. I mean, I saw that. Did anybody see that clip between Stephen Colbert and Ellen Page during the Jussie Smollett incident? Yeah? No? Well, anyway, Ellen Page.
I didn't see it.
No? No, there was no.
That's all right.
It was, even by then, it wasn't that long but right before Jussie Smollett, it turns out that he faked the crime. But they're still playing up on this, this happens all the time, this has to stop. And it's just, there was no criticism of the possibility that he may have actually been faking it, despite the fact there was enough circumstantial evidence beforehand. I mean, we knew within a couple days that he was like refusing to turn over his cell phone over to the police, which should be a red flag. We knew that he was trying as hard as he could to not contact the police. I mean, the first person he called was his frickin' manager. If you're the victim of a hate crime, then that's bad. That you got beaten down, they put a noose around your neck and poured bleach on you. Are you going to call your manager or are you going to call the police? Like, it's. Well, I mean, I think.
No,
Go ahead.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong in calling your manager, but like sometimes these celebrities and their managers have quite a close reaction. They all the time have to worry about public perception, so they always call the managers first to sort of figure out like how to manage the public perception of whatever is just police. So it's like an ordinary person doesn't have to at least that's my reasoning of it. So, but also the fact that I'm sure Trump was laughing his ass off during watching all the news channels during the Jussie Smollett coverage, because a lot of these news channels then they had to walk back everything they said about Jussie Smollett. But funnily enough, few days back, I was seeing, yesterday I was seeing a clip of this guy, Trevor Noah, talking about Jussie Smollett, right? Even after Jussie Smollett, called out as a fraud, he's been charge sheeted, he's been arrested. Even then, Trevor Noah has to put a positive spin on it, right? So he takes out this clip. So Trevor Noah plays out this clip of Jussie Smollett crying in an interview, and then he says either he's telling the truth or he deserves an Emmy for that performance. So he has to put a positive spin on his own people, right? And that should be called out at every instance possible.
Well, this has been something that we've seen a lot. I mean, even after what came out against the Covington Catholic kids, one reason that Bill Maher is being sued by one of the kids there is the fact that even after it came out and people were starting to report that, okay, these kids did nothing wrong, they were just standing there, and, it was the black Israelites that were really the ones that were throwing the hate around. Even then, Bill Maher came out and condemned them. So that's one of the reasons that he's being sued right now. But this is something that has happened time and time again, is even when they're wrong, they're willing to double down and continue lying about it.
Yeah. And the Washington Post is being sued for $250 million, right?
That's awesome.
Well, the thing is, so don't get too excited, because usually with a lawsuit, at least here in the U.S., I don't know how it is where you guys live, but they always sue for a much larger figure than they expect.
Even if they have to pay even if they get paid much less, Washington Post will have to pay some money. That will be out there, right? Even if they choose to settle, it's bad for the Washington Post. If they don't choose to settle and if they don't settle the case, they lose the case, because this is a clear-cut case of defamation. Because the kids they smeared are private citizens, not public citizens. So you can't argue that. Defamation, the defamation case, is much easier to prove. It's bad for Washington Post either way. which is funny for me because like I'm like one of those people at a Roman Colosseum, and I'm seeing the Washington Post getting eaten by hungry lions. So and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I actually found this story from Rolling Stone that was also false, and I sent it to the lawyer for the Covington kids, and I'm hoping that they eventually sue them too, because the guy did write back to me.
I didn't hear about that. Interesting though. Is there anything else you guys wanted to touch on before we signed off?
No, I think I'm cool.
Yeah.
All good?
We've spoken about a bunch of things today.
Yeah, we
All
did.
good.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you again for coming on. It's always good to have these conversations with you. I know it'd been a while since we'd all been together.
You want to talk about Robert Kraft hitting on Asians?
Okay.
Wait, what's that?
No, I'm just kidding. The owner of the New England Patriots just got busted for going to a massage salon with that allegedly, like, it's a prostitution place, but allegedly they like some of their people are underage or something. So it's like that's a little murky at the moment. But now they're putting out stories that he was hitting on Asian chicks at the Super Bowl. So it's like they'll grasp at anything.
So basically he has yellow fever and he wanted a happy ending.
Well, yeah, the chicks at the salon were also Asian apparently. So they usually are in the U.S.
The man knows what he likes.
Like I have had weird experience. Yeah, that he does.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there before you guys.
Although if he actually was going to one of those like brothels with underage prostitutes, that's just fucking disgusting. I have no time for that sort of thing.
Prostitute scandal is always hilarious.
I have no time when it comes to pedophilia or that, whether prostitutes or not. I have no time for pedophilia of that sort.
Oh, by the way, did you hear about that kid who brought about Adpocalypse 2 on YouTube because he busted a pedophilia thing?
I just think maybe that is the real reason they're doing it, but I just see it as an excuse to crack down on people some more because, like, now your comment section can get you demonetized. I mean, if somebody comes in and says something that YouTube doesn't like, even if you just didn't say anything, all of a sudden you're getting demonetized. I mean, even when we looked at some of it, there was like there was a video of just like a family that broadcasts on YouTube just sort of doing their own thing. And they got demonetized simply because they had their kids on. They had their kids on for a long time. I don't remember the name of the family, but they all, for a long time, had always shown their kids. You know, their kids talk to the camera and stuff. It was nothing malicious. It seemed like it was just a whole hard family fun. I mean, I wouldn't put my kids on YouTube when I have them, but yeah, it was just. But they were getting demonetized because of that. And I mean, YouTube in the past has proven that they don't care that much. They allowed this shit to go on. They've had YouTube videos, like when it came to Disney, that were borderlining pedophilia, and they never did anything about that for a long time. So I don't believe that they're cracking down on it now.
The YouTube Kids is a cesspool for like horrific videos. And all this, YouTube has triggered all this because why? Because some small company named Disney, I don't know if you've heard of it, pulled all their ads from the platform. So I don't know,
you know, it's funny.
Disney is a company that pushes bestiality, by the way.
Oh,
what
Jesus
Beauty
Christ.
and the Beast.
Oh, Jesus, man. What the hell is happening? Although,
okay, this podcast took a dark turn.
Anarcore in the chat was also saying that links apparently can get you strikes too. So not just your comment section, but anything you post to can get you demonetized now.
Well, if you don't post pedo links, then you're fine, I guess.
I guess not, but I could see that as just being even part of the. I could even just see it though, like say you're talking about a specific article and you link to it in your description. That could be something that gets you demonetized. And I mean, there's times where people, if you're talking about a certain subject, somebody in the comments section will send you a link and be like, "Hey, check this out" as well. Maybe even that can get you demonetized.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That means many people who are opinion guys or like editorial guys who come out and analyze like whatever is going on in the current sort of like in the current affairs, they will stop covering certain like articles because of the fear of getting demonetized, right?
Yeah, probably.
Right, I think I'm gonna move off, guys. But
all right, gentlemen, let's wrap this up.
All right.
Wrap this up. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me, and I'd like to thank everybody who tuned in. Always good to have you, and hopefully we'll be back here again soon doing this. So you gentlemen have a great day, and I guess, Arjun, you have a good night. Hey, no problem, man. Anytime.
Good night, Arjun.
Night, guys.
Have a good one, guys.
Vista.
Yeah.